Well, hello, and welcome to the second unit of the AAMP for Speech, Language, and Hearing. So in this section, we'll speak about phonation and how phonation basically occurs, and we'll look at the structure of the phonatory system or the laryngeal system. So in the first section, my goal is to orient you to the structure of the larynx and the basic parts of it. And then we go over a lot of the anatomy. And then the next couple of sections, we are going to speak about the dynamics of vocal fold vibration, how to adjust the vocal folds to make a high pitch, low pitch, and so on. So let's begin. The laryngeal system is a continuation of the respiratory system. And as a matter of fact, strictly speaking, when you speak about the upper respiratory system, that includes the larynx and the vocal folds and the oral cavity and so on. But to simplify the process and to enable the students of speech, language, and hearing communication disorder students to understand the systems, we kind of discuss them separately. So now we move from the respiratory system to the phonatory system or the laryngeal system. The laryngeal system, again, consists mostly of the larynx, and the larynx has a skeletal framework that is made mostly of cartilage. It just has one bone on top of it, and it has a lot of muscles that are attached on different parts of it, and some that have attachments. For example, they have origins outside the larynx and they attach to the larynx, so you can move it up and move it down. And just to give you an idea, if you can just put your finger on your what is called Adam's apple, see that little V shape? That V shape is called the thyroid notch. Under that V shape, you have a prominent point that you can touch. That is sometimes called Adam's apple. So that is the one part of your thyroid cartilage, which is the largest cartilage of the larynx. So that is your system where you phonate or make a sound. And you can see how the larynx is positioned in the middle of the neck, and you can see around it you have the thyroid gland. That is the gland that controls consumption of your energy to tell your body to burn less or more energy. You can see now two views, a lateral view of the laryngeal system, and there's a sagittal cut, and you could see now in the area where the vocal folds are here, and above you can see the epiglottis, for example, here, and we will show you more of the structures as we go. But I'd like you to understand that the larynx is in front of the esophagus. So let's trace. This is your oral cavity, and as you go down, and this is the lower part of your throat, your pharynx. On top of that, you have the eustachian tube in the nasopharynx, in the upper part of your pharynx. The pharynx is that vertical tube that goes from the back of the nasal cavity all the way down to above the larynx. So, and we divide it into three segments. We say the lower part next to the vocal folds or next to the larynx is called the laryngopharynx or the hypopharynx, two names. The part that's across from the oral cavity is called the oropharynx. And the part that's across from the nasal cavity in the posterior, makes the posterior segment of the nasal cavity, is called the nasopharynx. usually when you combine the word nasal with other things, or a word that has an L, you just take it out and put an O in front instead of the L. So the eustachian tube is opens onto the two sides of the nasopharynx. So anyways, you have a posterior view, which is also a coronal view, and that shows you how, see, the pharynx here leads to the esophagus. So that pharynx is shared. The pharynx is shared by the digestive system and shared by the respiratory system. So you breathe through it and you also speak through it. So the esophagus lies again behind the trachea and behind the larynx and the trachea. And you could see now in this image where it shows a posterior view, also a coronal cut, and you could see the back of the nasal cavity here, where you have the nasal conchae, and you have the soft palate or velum, and then you have the base or the root of the tongue, and it points out to the tonsils on either side. These tonsils, when you open your mouth, look in the mirror, you will see them. Called the palatine tonsils. And also the tongue itself, in the base of the tongue, has two additional tonsils called the lingual tonsils. You do not see them here in this image, but I'd like you to see how the laryngeal inlet, whereas the opening of the larynx is here. This is the epiglottis, like a lid that sits on top of the opening of the larynx, and then it closes when food comes. It's gonna go on top of that epiglottis. So automatically, once you get the swallow reflex triggered, food is coming this way, then the epiglottis is gonna tip over like a drawbridge, and it will cover the laryngeal inlet, and behind it is the esophagus, and the food is gonna just go down into the esophagus toward the stomach. So basically, because the food has to cross over the larynx, over this laryngeal inlet, there's always a risk for swallowing problems, for any liquid or food to drip down or to penetrate into the airway. So that is something that you need to pay attention to when you study swallowing and feeding. Okay. So let's go over some basic concepts. Phonation basically is making voice. Phone in Greek means sound, but it can be any kind of sound. The sound of a car, the sound. This is where we have the word telephone. Telephone means the sound that is far away. And then the term phoneme is a speech sound. Phoneme. And phonation is making sound, so the larynx, what it does, it has the vocal folds and it produces a buzz, like it makes that buzz. As the buzz exits into your pharynx, and then oral cavity or nasal cavity, it is then articulated in the oral cavity, where you block the air in different locations, and basically you chop that air column that is coming from the vocal folds, through the vocal folds, you chop that into speech sounds and words and so on. So phonation results from vocal fold vibration, and we'll demonstrate, we'll speak exactly and explain how this goes. So what is the source of energy that generates phonation, that generates a sound? I'm going to demonstrate for you with this balloon. So basically, you have a balloon, you have air. The source, the energy source for your phonation is the air that your respiratory system enables you to get in, the air that you have inhaled. And in English, English is a language like most languages in the world, where we speak with the air as the air goes out. So imagine this is your respiratory system, and your larynx, your trachea is here, and on top of the trachea is your larynx. Inside of the larynx, the only way that the air can go in and out is between the vocal folds. So you have a column of air in your lungs, and then you close the vocal folds to shut down the airway. The air inside of this of the lungs is going to build up pressure beneath the vocal folds and will force the edges of the vocal folds to be blown up apart, and it will vibrate them to make the sound. So just like this. Imagine here the vocal folds here, and this is what you get. So all that the laryngeal system makes is that buzz. Just that. Nothing else. So when we say phonation, we're not speaking about speech. Speech occurs when you take that sound, that buzz, and chop it into sounds, individual sounds and words, you make speech. But the phonation itself by itself is not enough to make speech sounds. So you could see now the vocal folds. Here they are open wide because you would have to breathe. And when the vocal folds are closed, you can't breathe. And on the right, that is the condition where you have brought the vocal folds together, but there's the air blows up the edges, the middle edges between them, and streams out. And then the vocal folds want to go back again to close, and then the air forces them apart, and then they try to go back again to the midline to close. And that resistance between the vocal folds trying to go back and the air pushing them away is going to produce the various vibrations of the vocal folds. They go like this for the adult male, approximately 115 times per second, and for the adult female approximately 225 times per second, like that. So that resistance between the air pressure and the elasticity of the vocal folds is what keeps them vibrating to generate the buzz. You can see now on the lower left, this is where the vocal folds are adducted. It is when they are closed and you are basically not breathing, like if you are swimming underwater or say you are holding your breath, this is what they would look like. No air is going out, no air is going in. So you notice around the vocal folds on the right and the left, the whole area is covered with tissue, and you do not have any air going through your respiratory system unless through the vocal folds. On the far right, lower, you have again open vocal folds. That is, we call them abducted, opened up wide together like abducted. And then adducted, added up, means closed. So we'll understand how you close them, how you open them, what muscles make them go this way, and so on. So because phonation is making a sound or making sound, phoneme means speech sound, and speech sounds can be made in 3 different ways. Number 1, by having a buzz from the vocal folds, vibration from the vocal folds. Whenever you have vibration of the vocal folds, we call this voicing, because voice is phonation. So if you say this sound is voiced, it means that the vocal folds made that sound. Voiced sounds include all of the vowels. So whenever you say any vowel of, for example, in English, there are 14 different vowels. And when you say ah, e, o, all these different vowels, every time the vocal folds are engaged, they are vibrating. For this reason, we do not describe the vowels in terms of voicing, because all of them are voiced. So what is the point? We just say, describe them using different criteria, but all the vowel sounds are voiced, and they are produced by vocal fold vibration. The second scenario you can make a sound is by not engaging the vocal folds at all in vibration. You can make a sound somewhere in the oral cavity or even between the vocal folds. But let's say examples of sounds in the oral cavity that do not require voicing. Again, remember, voicing is getting the vocal folds together, holding them together, and making air pressure blow them apart so that they can vibrate to make that buzz. When you say s, s, this sound, the only source of the sound is the constriction that you make between your tongue and the alveolar ridge behind these two big teeth. So that sound is called an alveolar sound, but it is voiceless. Voiceless means the vocal folds are not engaged in making it. They are not vibrating in any shape or form. So now we have voiced sounds. All vowels are voiced sounds. And then we have some of the consonants are voiceless sounds, no vocal fold vibration. And then the third category is a combination of sounds. They are a combination of consonants that have both vocal fold vibration and noise from the oral cavity. Somewhere in the oral cavity you have a noise there, but because when I say noise, the oral cavity doesn't make pure tones. So the vocal folds make a pure tone. So with again, there's no vocal fold vibration in the vocal tract. So in that sound, when you say s, that is a voiceless sound. The third category, which is voiced consonants, and they include oral cavity sounds in addition to vocal fold vibrations. Let's, instead of s, say zzz. You can touch your larynx, zzz, and you yourself are going to hear the vibrations very loud and clear when you say zzz. So when we say that zzz, it's a voiced consonant. It means it has vocal fold vibration, and it has noise or a certain sound that is made by noise somewhere along the vocal tract. I'll give you some examples of voiced and voiceless. Again, all vowel sounds are voiced sounds. Voiceless, we'll trace all of them from the beginning to the end here, from the lips. So voiceless is b. I'm sorry, take it back. P, p is voiceless, as in pan. And then you go and say f, as in thumb. Voiceless thumb, theta. And then you go into fun. That's f means it's a voiceless sound. And then you go to in more. You say s, and then a little bit behind this you get sh, and then you go back and you say k. That all of these are voiceless sounds. And then you go down to the vocal, between the vocal folds themselves, and you make two voiceless sounds. The first one that you make is the as in hand. That is like you bring the vocal folds close to each other, but they are not completely closed. They are not close enough to vibrate. So that is called that sound is called a glottal fricative. The glottis is the space between the vocal folds. Any sound, the sounds that are produced in that space are called glottal sounds, and we have two of them. So the that's a glottal fricative, and the next one is as in say up, up, or mud, So, and actually, it is not this one. It is. I'm gonna give you another word for this. When you say the word cotton, just say it like you usually do. Obviously, you do not say it cotton like that. When you say cotton or ba'al sometimes, so that that shuts down your airway like this, but you do not vibrate the vocal folds. You just shut down and go back again. So these two are voiceless glottal sounds. They do not involve vocal fold vibration. And then now, the voiced sounds are all consonants. So because when we say we do not describe vowels in terms of voicing, so all of them are voiced. When we look at consonants, we say a group is voiceless and a group is voiced. So the voiced sounds for the consonants are, again, from front to back, B as in banana, V as in van, V as in them, or feather, and you go higher to the alveolar ridge and say Z as in buzz, and you go a little bit higher to the palatal borderline between the alveolar ridge and the palate, and you say zh, and you go back to the back of the tongue and the soft palate. You say g, as in give, and then you go, basically that's it for the voiced sounds. I mean, not the voiced consonants. So I'd like you to remember to be able to give examples of voiced sounds, voiceless sounds, and also the sounds that have a combination of voiceless and voiced. So any consonant, again, that has both voicing and oral cavity noises or vocal tract noises, we say these are called voiced consonants. And again, you can see now the vocal folds, and the space in between them is called the glottis, and the cover that covers the vocal folds to protect them is called the epiglottis. And then we will orient ourselves. So the functions of the vocal folds, or the whole larynx itself, it serves as a valve. You have the air, and then you can just close that airway to control it, what is coming in, what is going out. So the larynx is the valve, that is the sphincter that controls the upper airway, the entire airway, as a matter of fact. So it has primarily biological functions, and then we learn to adapt it to use it for speech, and that's a secondary function. So one of the biological functions are to protect the airway. You basically have that the vocal folds, if you somehow there's something that needs to go in, that should not be going down the larynx, you close the vocal folds. And sometimes you close and then force them open up just very quickly by building pressure, and you expel anything that might have escaped, like when you cough or when you sneeze. So it also enables you to close the airway completely, to seal it, so you can build up pressure, for example, and lift up things, or you know, we have a lot of functions for example, using the bathroom, or giving birth, for example, or going underwater. So when you hold your breath, basically to exert effort, or if you have to underwater, if you don't have the vocal folds, and you know, close the vocal tract with them, then you would not be able to manage. And then the second function is basically speech as a sound generator. And in this regard, it is only fulfilling, you know, its function, speaking, when we are not using it for biological function, when you are not eating or are not holding your breath, and so on. And when we use it for speech as an extra, you know, function that we can add to that, we are able to make many changes to the vocal folds, adapt it to make high pitch, low pitch, and change the shape and the structure of the vocal folds, so that we can produce certain sounds. So again, understand the three functions of the larynx. Two of them are biological, to protect the and valve basically the airway, and to produce thoracic fixation for pushing and exerting effort, and so on. And then the third function is as a sound generator. It enables us to make sounds or to produce sounds for speech. So now let's look at the anatomical framework of the larynx. The larynx has 5 major cartilages and 2 pairs of smaller cartilages, and then it has a single bone, which is the hyoid bone. So these cartilages, the first and biggest one is the thyroid cartilage. You know what? The word thyroid is a Greek word, and it means shield. So basically that literally it's shaped like a shield, and in addition, metaphorically, it shields the vocal folds inside of it, because the vocal folds are small muscles, and it protects them, so it surrounds the vocal folds. And then we have, so this is a cartilage, and then beneath it is another, so this is the thyroid. Beneath it, there's another cartilage here that is called the cricoid. You notice that in the back, it is big, elevated, and in the front, it is small. So as you could see, it goes down and becomes, you know, smaller in the front here. And you notice that the thyroid cartilage articulates with the cricoid. It sits on top. However, it is connected here with 2 little joints, left and right, and that enables the thyroid to, you know, to kind of move. It can be pulled forward and it can come back. So that allows it that movement that we are going to see. I have a couple of videos and I'm going to show you. So now the hyoid bone sits on top of the trachea, basically, and it articulates with the superior horns of the thyroid cartilage. The thyroid cartilage has 2 sets of horns. The superior horns, where that, you know, that articulate with the hyoid bone, and the inferior horns that articulate with the cricoid cartilage to make, you know, these joints. Another important landmark, you know, on the cricoid cartilage, this model doesn't have the vocal folds. Basically, it's a very old model, unfortunately. But on top of the cricoid cartilage, there are 2 spots where 2 tiny cartilages called the arytenoids sit. They sit here. And each one has a vocal fold attached to it, and the vocal fold is also attached to the front, right beneath that, thyroid notch, that piece that you touched here. Beneath it, inside, you have the origin of the vocal folds. So these two all, each one is attached to one arytenoid, as we will explain later. So far, we've spoken about the thyroid cartilage, the cricoid cartilage, the hyoid bone, and these are the ones that are showing here. The epiglottis, it is not really shaped that well here, but the idea of it is that it sits here and it covers the laryngeal inlet so that food and liquid can go above it and go to the esophagus. Here is another model that basically shows you the same. So here's the larynx and the cricoid cartilage. The cricoid cartilage serves as the foundation of the larynx. And there's a membrane that connects the cricoid cartilages, all around, with the hyoid bone. That is called the thyroid membrane. And we'll look at it later. And in addition to that, there are various sets of muscles that we'll discuss. Some are called the intrinsic laryngeal muscles, and some are called the extrinsic laryngeal muscles. So the larynx is held from above by a number of muscles that come down from different origins, and they hold the larynx, they hold it up like this from above and suspend it in the neck. And these are called suprahyoid muscles because they, are connected on the hyoid, or basically originate above the hyoid, and they insert for the most part on the hyoid itself so that they can lift the larynx. There are other muscles that originate below the hyoid, the larynx, and then they bring down the larynx. So, for example, when you swallow, try it, swallow, and tell me what your larynx does. You notice it goes up and it goes forward a bit, up and forward. So forward so that it can be protected from the food and liquid that's coming. So you have some kind of another layer of protection. So these muscles that are originating above it, they are the ones that pull it up, and a muscle pulls it forward. And then there are other muscles that sit beneath the level of the hyoid, and they pull down the larynx. So the larynx inside is lined up with, inside of it, it's not going to show here, but it's lined up with epithelia here, and also the trachea itself, so that we call it beating cilia. If there's something that like it drips down, either little droplets of water or maybe little particles of dust, the cilia are gonna take that and flick it up, and then the cilia above is gonna take it and flick it up. So it's like a stairs, going up and flicking things up until they reach below your vocal folds, and then you are aware that there's some phlegm or something beneath them, and then you cough and you expel whatever is beneath there. But the beating cilia is what enables you to expel something and bring it up, like an escalator almost. So now you could see again here the trachea beneath the larynx, and then behind the larynx and the trachea is the esophagus, and you could see the epiglottis. Immediately as the swallow triggers, swallow reflex, then the epiglottis tips over and it covers the entire laryngeal inlet, and the food goes over it, falling down into the esophagus. So the inside also of the larynx itself, it has like smooth, and it facilitates the circulation of the air. It's aerodynamically kind of prepared, and it is, when you look at it, it has two segments. Again, the larynx itself, what is showing here, you have the glottis, space between the vocal folds. The area right beneath it's called the subglottis. And the space itself also is called subglottic space or subglottal space. The area, a little area above the vocal folds or the glottis, this is called the supraglottic space or the supraglottis or the supraglottal space. Okay, so here is a view, that's a coronal view of the vocal folds. Each vocal fold is cut, and that is the space in between them. Of course, that's the glottis. That beneath is the subglottic space, and above is the supraglottic space. In the supraglottic space, you have the ventricular folds. These are like cartilage, extensions of tissue that come down, and they are called the false vocal folds, and or the ventricular vocal folds. But the real vocal folds, you do not have to describe them as, say, the true vocal folds, unless you need to compare. But if you say the vocal folds, that means you are speaking about the ones that vibrate to make speech. There are people who learn how to vibrate the ventricular folds, like as in The Exorcist. And also you just say ventricular, you call it throat singing. Some people in Mongolia and different parts of India, they make that as part of a ritualistic kind of singing. But you just listen to it, it's very deep, very low pitch sound. So looking at the supraglottic cavity again, it houses the ventricular vocal folds. That's basically a mucous membranes hanging down here, coming down, and they don't really have the ability to be tense, to increase their tension, and they do not vibrate unless you learn how to vibrate them, and their voice is very guttural and very low pitch. So the space in between them here is also called the false glottis. So again, this cavity, the supraglottic cavity, is bounded by the vocal folds above, and the area right above the vocal folds, and the supraglottic space. It goes from above the glottis to the area where the vocal the false vocal folds or the ventricular folds are. So that is all part of the supraglottic. The subglottic goes, the upper limit of it are the vocal folds above it, and then below it's about like maybe 1/3 of an inch below, or close to 1/2 of an inch. And that kind of pressure that builds up beneath the glottis is what immediately comes in contact with the vocal folds to make vibration in that. And you can't build subglottic pressure here if you do not have adequate tracheal pressure, and if you do not have adequate pulmonary pressure. We discussed this in the respiration section. So question is, what is the difference between the supraglottic and subglottic regions? Which one houses the vocal folds? And the reality is, none of them houses the vocal folds. Why? Because the vocal folds make the boundary between them. and the space between the vocal folds is the glottis. So what is below the vocal folds, below the glottis, is called the subglottic space, and that doesn't have the vocal folds. What's above the vocal folds is the supraglottic, and it doesn't have the vocal folds. So the answer here is neither one. So the cartilages, the cartilages include 5 major ones. And of course you have, in addition, we discussed the hyoid bone. That's the only bone, and that bone is not connected to any other bone in the body. It's like the size of a quarter, but it is shaped like a C, and the front of the C is facing forward like this, and the back is, you know how it is, like this, facing that way. So this is the front, and then in back it is opened like a U shape or a C shape. So then these 5 major cartilages include the cricoid, which is the base, serves as the base of the larynx, cricoid, and then the thyroid, the largest cartilage that houses inside of it the vocal folds, and the arytenoids. You do not see them here, but we'll show them using images. There are 2 tiny cartilages again that sit on the posterior, the posterior rim of the superior posterior rim of the cricoid cartilage, and each one is attached to one vocal fold. And then we have one epiglottis. It is showing here, the epiglottis. That is, again, the structure that covers the laryngeal inlet to protect the vocal folds and the airway, the epiglottis. It's like a leaf-shaped cartilage. And then we have 4 minor cartilages, 2 pairs, basically. We have the corniculate cartilage. I mean, you could see them here. There's one. See, we have, one second. So we have here, these are the arytenoids. Here's one arytenoid, and there's the other arytenoid. On top of each arytenoid, there's a tiny cartilage looking like the kernel of a corn, and that is called corniculate because of that. And it's a very small, and it contributes to the tension somehow. You know, it contributes to the vocal fold function. So 2 corniculate cartilages sitting on top, each one is sitting on top of one arytenoid. And then the cuneiform cartilages, these are, you can see here, these little bulges here, covering here. This is one cuneiform cartilage one. And so when that leaf-shaped cartilage, the epiglottis, tips down, they help kind of make the closure better and protecting the airway, so nothing can drip down. So 5 major cartilages, 4 minor ones, and 1 hyoid bone. These are the skeletal, the structures that make up the skeletal framework of the larynx. We'll just repeat myself, go through some detail. Again, the cricoid is a ring of cartilage that is solid and rounded. All sides are closed. And the cartilage itself is big. See? It's big, like a solid ring. Beneath you have the trachea, and the trachea has rings, is made out of rings, but these rings are C-shaped. Because look, in the back, they are all opened. Of course, they are closed with muscle, but there's no cartilage. So I'm going to ask you to know the difference between the cricoid cartilage and the tracheal cartilages. What is the difference? the cricoid is larger, closed all the way around. The cricoid is not symmetrical. It has, the back of it is quite big and elevated because you want to have the arytenoids to sit on it. And the front of it is very small, and it is shaped like a signet ring. The laryngeal, the tracheal cartilages are smaller, and they're shaped like a C, and so they are not closed all the way around, and they are smaller. So the cricoid serves as the foundation of the larynx. You can see it now here. I want you to know the landmarks of the cricoid. You have three different views of it here. Here's the front, and this is the posterior part. On top of it, you find these structures. These are the arytenoid cartilages. One is here and one is here, and each one is going to have a vocal fold attaching to it. So when you move these arytenoids, swing them left or right, they are going to bring with them the vocal folds. So it will be like this. Imagine these are the arytenoids, and you go somehow swing the arytenoids they are going to bring the vocal folds this way. We call this adduction. If you swing the arytenoids away, you take them away, you make the vocal folds abducted, taken away from each other. There are two basic landmarks on the cricoid. These lateral facets, where the thyroid, inferior horn of the thyroid, articulates on this facet to make a joint. So two lateral facets, one on the left, one on the right. Again, for the articulation with the inferior thyroid horns. And then we have the superior facets on top, on the very top of the cricoid cartilage. You do not see them here, obviously, but they should be here. There are two spots where one arytenoid will be placed here, one arytenoid will be placed here. So you can see that in the image. These are the facets. One is here, one is here. So these are very important because this is where these arytenoid cartilages sit and articulate to make joints, and this is where they can rotate left and they can be rotated left and right by muscles to bring the vocal folds back and forth. We'll demonstrate this in class. So again, the arytenoid cartilages are small, pyramidal shaped, and so if you look at the shape of that, the one arytenoid will be like this, and it's pyramidal in shape. And so here's a front, and here's one side, here's one side. So it has like one wing on the, on one side. That's called the muscular process. And on the other side, it also has like another end. And you can see the top segment of it. This segment is the corniculate cartilage sitting on top of it here. So it has a vocal fold attached to it. If you take one arytenoid like this and twist it, like this, for example, like this, in effect, then you have swung the vocal fold closer to the midline. So again, you go like this and twist it like that, and then you swing the vocal fold from here, to the midline, and then you swing it this way to close, swing it that way to open. Imagine another one on the other side. So when both of them come like this, they close. When both of them swing like that, they open. And muscles do that. Cartilages cannot move on themselves. Bones cannot. You have to have muscles attaching to them. The thyroid cartilage, as I mentioned, is the largest of all the cartilages of the larynx, and it is named so because it looks like a shield. And the basic landmarks of it are that it has that V shape. That is a space. It has nothing in it. It says space. So the thyroid notch, again, it is not a structure. It's like the glottis. The glottis is not a structure. It is a space. Beneath, so that tipping point, I mean the very lower point below the thyroid notch, that is the prominent part of the thyroid as it is shaped, as you could see. And so that is one major landmark, the thyroid notch, because we'll be referring to it. Where do the vocal folds originate? You say on the anterior surface of the thyroid cartilage, means inside and front, below the thyroid notch. So below the thyroid notch and inside and in front, you're going to have the origins of the vocal folds, and they go down, and then each one of them is going to connect with one vocal fold, like with one arytenoid like this. And another landmark is the superior horns here, the superior horns that articulate with the hyoid bone, and the inferior horns that articulate with the lateral facets of the cricoid cartilage. Now, with these two joints, where the thyroid articulates with the cricoid, it allows the thyroid to be pulled down and forward. When you do that, because the vocal folds are attached to the thyroid here, when you tilt the thyroid forward and down, it pulls the vocal folds with it. And in that case, you have made the vocal folds longer. And by making them longer, what else have you changed? I'm going to ask you to think about the tension. When you elongate the same vocal folds, do you have more tension or less? My next question, does that tension make the vocal folds vibrate faster or lower? Does that raise pitch or lower it? Okay, my next question, when you elongate the vocal folds, do you change mass? Do you make mass more per inch or per centimeter? Do you make every inch or every centimeter heavier or lighter? Because there are three determinants of pitch: length, tension, and mass. So again, if I have the thyroid tilted forward and down, I'm gonna elongate the vocal folds, and by doing so, I am gonna change pitch. I'm gonna make it higher, because elongation is going to put more tension, and we understand if something is vibrating, you make it more tense, it is gonna make it vibrate at a higher pitch. And if something is, you elongate it, you also make it, the amount of matter inside of every centimeter in it, when you extend, it becomes less. That becomes less massive. And as a result, you also raise pitch. So by simply elongating, you have changed mass, and you have changed tension, and you have made pitch higher. So again, here are the superior horns. Here are the inferior horns. Here is the V notch, the thyroid notch. And you need to understand these landmarks and what their significance is. The vocal folds originate beneath the thyroid notch, and each one courses posteriorly to connect onto one arytenoid. And you can see in the front, this is the front view, epiglottis, and you have the hyoid bone, you have the thyroid membrane, sometimes called the cricothyroid membrane, and then you have muscles that we are going to be intimate with, we are going to know. But for now, I'd like you to know that there's a ligament that connects the thyroid in the front with the anterior superior segment of the cricoid. It shows here, just it's very tiny here. So that is called the first crico and then thyroid. Cricothyroid ligament. It connects these two so that they stay together. Cricothyroid ligament. And you can see how the trachea sits beneath the cricoid cartilage. Here's another view of the cricothyroid ligament, but it is called the thyrohyoid. I'm sorry, this is another one. This is another one. Don't worry about this one. Just know the cricothyroid ligament. So again, the epiglottis, as I explained, is a leaf-shaped structure that originates beneath the thyroid notch in the anterior and anterior surface of the thyroid cartilage, and it rises, and when food or liquid come in, then as soon as the swallow reflex triggers, then that thing is going to tip over and it will protect the entire airway beneath it. And I explained to you that the cuneiform cartilages are on, in these locations here, and they serve to make the epiglottis kind of rest on them, come in contact with them, and cover, so that you effectively close the laryngeal inlet. So the epiglottis is very critical. If someone doesn't have it, they are at a very high risk for aspiration, taking in liquid, that would go into the airway, and they could choke, or they could have pneumonia, and so on. And you can see them here, like two little bulges over there. So here again, of this view, you can see now the three parts of the pharynx: the nasopharynx, as I explained earlier at the beginning, and then the oropharynx, and then you have that blue segment, either the hypopharynx or the laryngopharynx. Both of them are names that we use. And you can see the glottis and the supraglottic space, and we do not see the subglottic space here. But it's important to notice the epiglottis, how when this food or whatever you have reaches this area here, that immediately is going to trigger the epiglottis to be ready and shut, tip over, and it will come to this point here, and it will cover everything beneath it. And the food and liquid will just flow on top of it down to the esophagus. I explained that the hyoid bone is shaped like a U shape, or as a C shape, and that it supports the larynx from the top. The entire larynx is suspended to it, so wherever the hyoid bone goes, so goes the larynx. Okay, looking at the membranes and ligaments, again, I'm repeating a lot here to give you the benefit of kind of going back and forth and having more exposure to the information. So we have the thyroid membrane, and And that's basically a continuous sheet that connects that closes the space between the thyroid and the hyoid bone, and it protects it basically here. It kind of keeps them together, and at the same time the space between them stays also consistent. And then we have the cricothyroid ligament that connects the anterior part of the cricoid with the inferior anterior part of the thyroid cartilage. So again, they can stay together. And the inside is lined up with the mucous membrane that is, slippery and flexible, and you don't want it to be dry there, because the air, as it goes in and out, it becomes very dry if you do not hydrate yourself. Here's another ligament. I'll explain this in more detail. That ligament is part of the vocal fold. That is like a very tough string that the vocal fold sits on, so that it can stay suspended from, over the cricoid cartilage. But we'll explain that. So when that is connected to the arytenoid cartilages, when they swing, or they are made to swing in, you adduct the vocal folds. When you swing them out like around like this, then you open the vocal folds. So again, this is called the vocal ligament. It is not exactly the same as the vocal fold, but I'll explain the difference later. So here you could see the vocal fold itself. Here, these parts, you can see one part that is the white part, that is your vocal ligament. And then you have the muscle tissue, that is called the thyrovocalis, because it is the muscle that actually makes the vibration. And behind it on the other side, you have the thyromuscularis, that is inside, and it is tougher, and it doesn't contribute as much to vibration. Most of the vibration is produced by the thyrovocalis muscle, and the cover, particularly the cover that lines it up. So the entire muscle of the vocal fold, both parts, and the arytenoid and that ligament, vocal ligament, all of these 1, 2, 3 segments are called the vocal fold. And that vocal fold, as a part, this whole thing, both the thyromuscularis and the thyrovocalis, they are called the thyroarytenoid muscle. So again, the muscle itself that makes a vocal fold is called the thyroarytenoid. Why? Because it originates on the thyroid cartilage and inserts onto the arytenoid cartilage, each one. So you call it thyroarytenoid. Okay, so this ends the first segment. And then next time we're going to look at the muscles, and we'll look at how the vocal folds are brought to the midline, how they are adjusted in different ways, how to phonate. What I would like you to get out of this whole unit, section 1, 2, and 3, is to understand the structure and function of the vocal folds, and how you produce high pitch, how you produce low pitch, basically how you adjust the sounds that you make, and how you produce sound in general. And I will be posting the next one, hopefully before the end of the week. Thank you.